Hi all. This is week 3 lecture on the reading Visualizing Punishment. We will be going over this reading and the associated prompt. For this one, you do want to get your textbook out. Starting on page 45 is the first graph we're going to be looking at, so you might want to pause this right now and take care of that. We are going to be talking about some of the misconceptions that people commonly have about the data surrounding the prison system. And then we're going to look at the realities shown by data. So basically what we're looking at is we're comparing people's misconceptions about the prison system and prison growth and all of that. Then we're going to look at the actual information. And this kind of comparison is one of the #1 reasons we have the social sciences in the first place. Then we will talk about some of the conclusions you could draw from the data, and then we'll talk about our prompt. So, common misconceptions people have about crime is that it is going up. And I'll address each of these in the next slide too. That we have this misconception that the American prison system is normal. And when you compare it to other prison systems, we are a little bit different, to put it very politely. Then the misconception that the prison system is fair, again, we have charts that address that, or at least question whether the system is, quote, fair. And people have a misconception that once a convict serves his or her time, that they are free to go, that they've served their time, and they are full citizens then. And in many states, that's not true. These misconceptions, the reason I'm putting it out is this is, of course, also about policy. And these mistakes cause mistakes in policy. And then mistakes in legislative policy create further social problems who could create further criminals, and we get a downward spiral kind of situation. The reality shown by data, starting on page 45, we can see that the incarceration rate has gone up steadily since about 1975, and it continued to go up through the 90s, and to this day, it's more or less leveled off since 2011. And then we see that violent crime rate did indeed go up until about 1992. And then it started to go down dramatically. And in the mid-90s, as more prisons were being built, the incarceration rate went up past the violent crime rate. And when you look at that, you can start to think, well, maybe this is because the prison system started to catch up with the crime rate, but we have reasons to believe otherwise. The main thing I want you to take from this, based on the topic, is that the crime rate is going down. Things are not getting worse all the time. Our perception might be that they're getting worse, but in reality, you are safer statistically now than you were in 1995, or if you were alive in 1995, than your parents were in 1995. Page 48, and I'm flipping along with you, the U.S. Prison system is different. More people are in our prisons per population. So that's not to say the more actual number of people, but the greater percentage of our population. You look, India is an incredibly dense country, right? There's a lot of people, but they have, compared to their population density, fewer people in prisons. So if you think about people per 100,000, the Indian prison system has 3 people in per 100,000. We have 75 people in per 100,000. And that is that is about, I could be wrong here, I'm pulling off the top of my head, I don't have the data in front of me, about maybe 3% of our population, that's a lot of people. So, the criminal justice system is unfair. So let's look at page 56. And in unfair, we mean racist. It's straight up racist. So we see that we see from the charts here, male high school dropouts are about 10% of, no, not even 8% of the total population in prison. All males aged 20 to 40 are another chunk. And then black males who were high school dropouts are the greatest percentage. Those are the people most likely to go to prison. And if there wasn't a racist component to it, if we are assuming that black people and white people are of equal intelligence, which all social science seems to indicate, it does indicate. There's no biological difference between the races, and it certainly doesn't have an impact on intelligence. Well, then, we would expect white high school dropouts to be just as likely to be in prison as black high school dropouts. This indicates fundamental unfairness in the way we treat people of different races. And then, if you really want to read more about that, that racial dynamic, that racial dilemma, I highly suggest you reading Lundman and Kaufman's journal article called Driving While Black. It's 2003. So if you go into EBSCOhost, you put Lundman and Kaufman 2003, it should come up. And then on page 60, you turn to there and you see disenfranchisement due to felony convictions. So what that means is taking away your right to vote. When we talk about disenfranchisement, we're usually talking about the right to vote. So there are states such as Florida, such as Alabama is that big blob in the middle, where people are forbidden to vote. Many people are forbidden to vote after they get out of prison. And there is a lot of inequality to that. So if you're a young kid that gets caught with some drugs in their pocket by a cop, and everything goes terribly wrong, and you go to jail, and you're out by the time you're, let's just say 28, you won't be able to vote for the rest of your life. And that has fundamental problems, especially if, a disproportionate number of African Americans have been in the prison system. So that means a disproportionate number of African Americans are unable to vote, as opposed to that same portion of the white population. So we do see racial dynamics entering into politics, and just deeply troubling. It's all part of the racial structures in our society that continue to be a problem to this day. So what are some conclusions we can draw from this data? Measures need to be taken to minimize racism. That would probably be most sociologists' number one advice to policymakers. The prison system needs to be restructured, the way we treat criminals. Not saying to make it like a hotel in there, but we definitely need to think about what we're doing with people for years of their lives. And the voting laws. Most Americans feel that once you serve your time, you should be allowed to become a full citizen again. So a reform of the voting laws is probably also in order. So our discussion prompt for this week, I want you to take a good look at that male incarceration rates in 2000. It does show us that male high school dropouts have higher incarceration rates than those who completed high school. And it shows conclusively that black males who drop out of school are dramatically more likely to be incarcerated than other males. So for this discussion prompt, I want you to imagine that you are a prominent community member in an urban neighborhood with a large proportion of African American youth, youth being defined as people under the age of 25. And then imagine that the mayor of your city awards you a grant to prevent young people in your neighborhood from going to prison. There are a few more stipulations on that grant in the actual discussion prompt. And, just try to come up with some ideas. How would you, if you were in a position, keep young people from going to prison? How would you motivate them? And we'll talk about this on the discussion board, and I look forward